Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the OSINT Bunker podcast's news snapshots. We are back with you here at the end of January, and I'm joined this evening by George and OSINTtechnical, and we'll be discussing a roundup of the news over the last 2 weeks. I think we're going to start off with sort of the biggest news story of the day, news that's broken in the last couple of hours from the US in relation to the death of 3 soldiers and injuries to 25 others in a one-way unmanned aerial vehicle attack on a US base in Jordan. President Joe Biden has said that the attack is believed to have been carried out by a pro-Iran group based in Syria and Iraq, and he's also emphasised that the US intends to respond at a time and place of its choosing. What are we thinking about this, guys? This is obviously quite a major development now that we've actually got US casualties in this incident.
Yeah, I mean, over 100 strikes by Iranian-backed militias in Iran and Syria, or Iraq and Syria, over the past few months, and something like this was going to happen. I mean, it was sheer luck that we didn't have something like this happen in previous months. And time kind of finally ran out there. There's really nothing else to say. It is obviously mourning the loss of 3 service members. The consequences of this, obviously, the U.S. has made it clear that there will be. Yeah, I do believe that we will see a real response to this.
Yeah, politically, Biden's got no choice now. He's been banging on for months about, a red line of the continuing attacks, and we've seen in the last few weeks obviously these strikes against the Houthis, but other sort of pro-Iran groups have kind of been allowed to carry on doing what they've been doing. And now that we've actually got fatalities involved and not just injuries as we've had in previous incidents, he's got no choice. He's going to have to do something, if at the very least to save face domestically and in front of his allies, because if the US allows these Iranian groups, or Iran itself arguably, to get away with this act, that it's not much different from Russia saying they've got red lines about things. The world is going to turn around.
It's not even a red line thing. Iran has put together what is arguably a shadow war against the U.S. through their militia groups in Iraq and Syria, and they've been waging a campaign. They've made it very, very clear that they're going to continue waging a campaign against U.S. forces in the region, and yeah, that's I mean, this is the eventual end to that. This is the end result is the death of U.S. service members, and based on the report, the base that was struck was on the Syrian Jordanian border, which it isn't even as relevant or as egregious to the Iranians. Its presence is very much associated towards preserving Jordanian security more than anything, and countering what remains of ISIS in the area. And it's something that we'll see a response. I mean, there really isn't much more I can even say.
I think the big question is, how will Washington respond? What is the US most likely to do here?
I think it's really hard to say, because at the minute, obviously, there's no specific pro-Iran group that has actually claimed responsibility for the attack.
Yeah.
And whether that will change in the coming hours after we've finished recording remains to be seen. But I don't think the US is going to rush a response here. At the end of the day, we've seen over the last couple of weeks with the various US and allied airstrikes that have been carried out, some of them have been, sort of in direct response within hours of certain incidents, and others of them it's been a matter of days before we've seen a direct response to an incident. So the original sort of launch of a missile towards HMS Diamond, the US and UK joint airstrike that responded to that came a good sort of 48 hours later.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I think for this, we'll see a quicker response. I think that yes, we pick the time and manner of our response, but at this point, the response has to be because of just what the Iranian aligned militia groups have said. The response needs to take away their capability to conduct these attacks, or just it needs to remove that capability and remove that threat, which is very difficult.
I think we've sort of seen with President Biden's response, as you've said, this isn't going to be an immediate response. He said the US will respond at a time and in a manner of our choosing. So I think that's clearly sort of setting the scene for this isn't going to be something that's going to be responded to tomorrow.
Yeah, I genuinely think that just one, due to the public statements made already by leaders in the U.S., by members of Congress, those statements have very clearly indicated a desire for a response that isn't just practical but also symbolic. And I think the Biden administration will have to balance how symbolic they want that response to be on top of whatever military action it is. Right now in the Red Sea, the U.S. attacks or the U.S. strikes against Houthi targets are more utilitarian than anything. They're targeting Houthi launch sites before they can manage attacks. They're targeting Houthi capabilities to conduct attacks. Whereas I think for this one, it will be more symbolic, or there will be a larger symbolic element to it.
Yeah, and it's worth saying as well that obviously HMS Diamond, as I mentioned a short while ago, was targeted again in the last 24 hours, and the UK has released a statement in relation to that as well. Obviously, the first joint strike, as I said, was following the attack on HMS Diamond a couple of weeks ago now, and it's probably worth remembering that that was a response that came very, very quickly. I think there's a good chance, in light of what's happened today, both the US and the UK will probably be looking at further strikes right now. Whether that ends up being Iraq and Syria, Iranian-backed groups, or elsewhere, obviously we'll have to wait and see. But it's worth saying that unlike with the strikes on Yemen, the UK has assets a lot closer to Iraq and Syria should a response be coming imminently.
I would add that there does seem to be a small aversion to directly connecting the events ongoing in Yemen right now with what's happening in Iraq and Syria. Though both groups are directly supported and backed by Iran, they kind of have different goals. And different stated campaigns of achieving those goals. Do we want to touch on Ukraine real briefly?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I wasn't here, unfortunately, for the last news update. So I will be the one to touch on Ukraine this time. As John probably tears his hair out over in the corner. What is there in the last month that I haven't talked about yet? The Russians continue to basically just throw material at Ukrainian lines, crossing open fields into Ukrainian ATGM ambushes, and that continues to be a massive issue for them as they take fairly horrendous casualties, to be honest. I don't think there's another appropriate term for what's happening to the Russian assault groups that are sort of conducting these missions. They're just running into withering Ukrainian fire. But on the note of withering Ukrainian fire, it's been now a month since the U.S. has delivered or put together its last aid package, and has been unable to put together one since then, due to the lack of reallocation of funds and what may be the unwillingness or lack of capability of the executive branch to pursue other methods to gather funds for Ukrainian weapons. I truly do believe that right now European countries are handling the bulk of the planned delivered weapons for 2024. Germany announced a €7.5 billion program to provide Ukraine with a significant amount of material, including armored vehicles, tanks, and other weapon systems, including desperately needed engineering systems. That will continue to backfill a bunch of Ukrainian needs, but in the long term, the Germans have only announced the delivery of about 200,000 shells to Ukraine in 2024, which is under 1,000 shells a day. And that puts the Ukrainians still in a very, very hard position where they have to be backstopped. And currently they're using FPV munitions to make up for that gap, but they really are hitting a huge gap there. Additionally, if you look at who has GMLRS stocks for the Ukrainian HIMARS, it's basically just the U.S. No one else has the capability to restock Ukrainian HIMARS. The UK has a incredibly marginal capability to replenish Ukrainian MLRS stocks. But short of that, the crunch is going to be significant in 2024, and in my opinion, could really cause the Ukrainians to take more drastic options and operations to change the current operating environment.
Yeah, and finally, I think we should probably touch on developments in the Red Sea. We have already kind of alluded to the ongoing Houthi attacks, but I think it's fair to say that there was a particularly notable incident in the last sort of 48 hours where an oil tanker was actually hit and caught fire, and there was a joint effort by, I believe it was a US destroyer, an Indian Navy destroyer, and a French frigate to assist the crew of that ship with firefighting.
Yeah. 10 Indian Navy sailors with specialist firefighting equipment actually boarded the vessel. The USS Cony, the French frigate Alsace, and I cannot for the life of me remember the Indian destroyer's name, but yeah, it was quite the operation. The Houthis, I think they stated the vessel was British and was targeted in response to American and British aggression, I think. But I think the vessel's also registered to the Marshall Islands, and is the operator of the vessel British?
The operator is a large British corporation.
Right. Okay, yeah.
It was a Marshall Islands flagged, Indian Crude, British operated tanker carrying Russian oil products.
United Nations.
Welcome to international shipping, everyone. Yeah. It's very diverse. The Carney, I'm aware that the Carney showed up and immediately provided firefighting help. From what I'm aware of, the ship had pretty much run out of firefighting foam, and the Carney was able to provide it with some additional firefighting foam to fight the fire. The Indian Navy obviously was able to provide a damage control team to go on board and help physically fight the fire on board the ship. I know the French were on scene as well, and participated in the firefighting efforts. This really was a large operation to save the vessel, and was successfully done so.
But yeah, well, even when rendering aid, the Carney was also fired upon, if I remember correctly. Obviously, it shot down the Houthi missile, but
yeah, they were on scene both too.
And the Carney is rapidly tossing up quite a kill streak, really, when we consider how long it's now been deployed, involved in this ongoing fight. Whether it and some of the other US destroyers are going to need to make port and resupply ammunition in the near future remains to be seen, but I would imagine that's something the US Navy is probably going to have to consider fairly soon.
How long has the Carney been out there?
I want to say it was there before Christmas.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it arrived with the Ike strike group. Anything else we want to add quickly before we bring this to a close?
Actually, I'll just circle back around. How long has HMS Diamond been on station?
So Diamond arrived. She arrived before Christmas as well, because we thought she was swapping with what was it, HMS Lancaster?
Yeah,
I want to say. But HMS Lancaster hasn't actually gone home in the end, does she? She's still out in the Gulf. So we've got, I think it's 2 frigates and 1 destroyer on rotation in the Gulf at the minute.
And so I think the question is, the Diamond is obviously making a number of intercepts. At what point will the HMS Diamond have to circle back and come to a place where it actually is able to rearm its VLSs or VLS singular?
Very soon. The vessel obviously didn't sail with a full complement of Sea Vipers. They very rarely do. And this is the third action she's been involved in.
Yeah. I think she should be okay for the moment because, as you say, it's only the third time she's actually fired at this point. And yes, although she doesn't carry a full missile load normally, I don't think we're anywhere near close to her running out at the moment, whereas the Cony and some of the other US destroyers have been firing an awful lot over the last few weeks and the last month or so. Obviously,
granted, I think the other question is how many missiles is it fired during the engagement, and what is the acceptable minimum number of missiles that it can have in the area? Because obviously, it's the Diamond isn't going to stay around until it runs out of interceptors.
No, exactly.
No.
I think the advantage with Sea Viper, if I recall correctly, is that because of the guidance involved in it, unlike previous generation missiles where they would launch 2 missiles for each target to ensure that one of them hits, I think Sea Viper is advanced enough that the tactic is to only launch 1. Now, it's fair to say that actually the MOD hasn't clarified for certain that each of the engagements that Diamond has been involved in has actually involved a missile, but we do know for a fact, based on photos that have been released, that at least 2 of the engagements have involved the launch of Sea Viper missiles.
Yeah, I mean, MOD...
yeah, and I oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, please, I insist.
I was going to say the final question is, if Diamond has to rotate out, is there another vessel available to replace it? Is there another Type 45 available?
The Ministry of Defence officially say yes, but speaking to people, relatively involved with that, they're counting availability as a ship that can be deployed relatively soon, not one that can be deployed, tomorrow. It would be very unlikely a Type 45 would be in a position to take over in a sort of short scale time frame. But John might know more on that.
I believe we've got 2 Type 45s on standby in the UK at the minute in various stages of either training or sort of pre-deployment workups. I know at least one of the others is in long-term maintenance, undergoing sort of a major overhaul. I think realistically we need to consider, obviously, whereas the US have destroyers forward deployed to the likes of Rota in Spain and elsewhere, and therefore could rotate destroyers in and out far more quickly, any UK rotation is going to involve a Type 45 sailing from the UK through the Mediterranean into the Red Sea, which will obviously take time. It's going to need the Royal Navy to sort of focus on the sort of bit more long-term planning for this, if that's going to end up happening. And at the end of the day, as I say, HMS Lancaster has now been out in the Gulf for a little while, and there was an expectation that she was going to rotate home when HMS Diamond arrived, but she's now remained in theatre, so it's entirely likely they may have to deploy 2 vessels at some point in the not too distant future in order to replace both Lancaster and Diamond.
Well, Richmond's on the way there just now, if I remember correctly.
I think Richmond's the one that arrived as well to join Lancaster, but I don't know if she's actually engaged yet.
Yeah, though at the same time, obviously, a Type 23 has less of a capability to do what Diamond is doing right now in the Red Sea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really does show the weakness of only having 6 destroyers in the fleet.
Yeah, I mean, even of the 2 of the 3 ships that the Ministry of Defence said were available, Dauntless is currently docked down and Duncan is in the fleet time support period. So, I mean, neither are really particularly available either. Neither are currently armed, so not that would take too long.
Yeah, just it takes that time to get sort of set back up.
Yeah.
And also if one of the Queen Elizabeths were to deploy to the area, it would probably or possibly have to travel to the region without necessarily a Type 45 escort if things hit during the wrong point in the rotation. Obviously, the U.S. would probably backstop with a Burke, but...
Yeah. And I think on that note, in order to avoid technical having too much to edit, we are going to call it a day with this episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. This has been News Snapshots from the OSINT Bunker podcast team, and we will be back with another episode giving you the latest news in a couple of weeks' time.